Before we begin, I wanted to thank Scarling99367 for this incredible story request. If you have ideas for future stories, please leave them in the comments below. What if the empty space between you and the stars isn't empty at all? The cockpit went dark at 39,000 feet, and Aaron Cole's first thought was electrical failure. His second thought, the one that made his hands tighten on the yoke, was that the stars had disappeared. Not behind clouds, not behind weather, they'd been covered. June 12th, 2016. The operations room at PHNL smelled like burnt coffee and air conditioning that had been running since the Reagan administration. Aaron Cole stood at the long table, reading the flight release with the methodical attention of someone who'd learned that skipping details could kill you over an ocean that didn't care about experience. Convective cluster. Maya Ortiz tapped the satellite image on her tablet, zooming into the swirling mass of white that sat like a tumour on the route to Taipei. Tops to flight level 470. That's a beast! Aaron nodded, studying the image. At 44, he'd seen plenty of Pacific weather systems, the kind that could tear an aircraft apart or leave it pristine depending on where you threaded the needle. This one looked organised, mean, with an anvil blow-off that stretched for 200 nautical miles. "We'll offset south," he said. "Add 20 minutes to the flight time, but we stay in smooth air." Maya made a note on her kneeboard. She was 31, former meteorology student who'd pivoted to aviation, when she realised she'd rather fly through weather than just predict it. Her attention to detail had saved them fuel and turbulence more times than Aaron could count. The dispatcher, a tired-looking man named Rodriguez, slid the final release across the table. "ETOPS checks are green. Guam's your alternate if the Pacific decides to be Pacific. Note here." He tapped a line of text. "Watch for anvil outflow. Extreme upper-level ice crystals reported in the area." "Ice crystals at cruise?" Maya frowned. "That's not typical." "Nothing about this system is typical." Rodriguez pulled up a water vapour image. "Look at this dry slot." Aaron leaned in. The image showed the storm's structure, but cutting through the cirrus plume were linear voids, perfectly straight, like something had carved channels through the moisture. "Gravity waves," Maya suggested. "Maybe." Rodriguez didn't sound convinced. "Met team flagged it as unusual but not hazard. Just keep your eyes open." Aaron signed the release. 10,500 hours in the logbook, most of them over water, most of them at night. The 767 freighter sitting on the ramp was familiar, reliable, a workhorse that asked for respect but gave it back. They'd be fine. The departure from Honolulu was textbook. Runway 26 right, climbing turn to the west, then northwest toward the great empty blue. Below, the city lights of Oahu faded into scattered settlements, then black water reflecting starlight. At flight level 390, the 767 settled into its cruise rhythm. Mach 0.80. Engines humming their steady song. The autopilot made tiny corrections, nudging the aircraft along the invisible highway in the sky. Maya checked the CPDLC, controller pilot data link communications, and confirmed their position with Oakland Oceanic. Text messages in the sky. Position reports sent automatically. The HF radio crackled with static and distant voices. Other flights scattered across the Pacific, all of them alone together. "Weather radar looks good," Maya said, adjusting the tilt. The display showed the storm cluster to the north, angry reds and magentas, but their track was clean. Smooth air ahead. Aaron glanced at the overhead panel. Pressurization steady at 7,700 feet cabin altitude. Fuel flow nominal. Outside air temperature minus 57 Celsius. Everything by the numbers. The cockpit was dark except for the instrument glow, that familiar cave of green and white light that every airline pilot knows better than their own living room. Beyond the windscreen, stars stretched in every direction, the kind of view that reminded you how small you were and how far from anywhere. 2 hours to the weather, Aaron said. "I'll take first break after we're clear." Maya nodded, making a note in the logbook. "I'll keep the radar." The cockpit dimmed. Not the instruments. Those stayed bright, steady, reliable. But the ambient starlight that had been filtering through the windscreen, the faint glow that gave depth to the night. It faded, as if someone had drawn a curtain across the universe. Aaron's eyes went to the overhead panel. No warnings, no cautions. "Are we in cloud?" Maya leaned forward, peering up through the windscreen. "Can't be." Aaron checked the weather radar. Clear returns ahead, the storm still miles north. Nothing on radar, but something was out there, something between them and the stars. The static wicks began to crackle. They were small metal probes mounted on the wingtips and tail, designed to bleed off electrical charge and prevent St. Elmo's fire, that eerie blue glow that could dance across a windscreen in heavy weather. The crackling was faint, a sound Aaron felt more than heard, a sensation in his teeth and fingertips. Are we being painted? Maya checked the TCAS, the Traffic Collision Avoidance System. The display was empty. No aircraft within 40 miles. Nothing on traffic. Aaron scanned the instruments again. Everything still normal, but his instincts, honed over thousands of hours, were screaming that something was wrong. The starlight didn't return. Above them, beyond the thin aluminum skin of the fuselage, something massive moved through the night. "Radar's going weird." Maya's voice had that controlled flatness that professional pilots use when things start to deviate from normal. Aaron looked at the weather radar. Display. The storm returns that had been painting clearly to the north were fading, not like distance attenuation, but like something was absorbing the signal. In a cone directly ahead, maybe 20 degrees wide, the display showed nothing. Behind the nothing, distant storms reappeared. "Attenuation," Aaron suggested, though he didn't believe it. "From what?" Maya adjusted the tilt, then the gain. The blind spot remained. There's nothing there to attenuate. Aaron reached for the EVS control. The enhanced vision system, an infrared camera mounted in the nose, typically used for low visibility approaches, came to life on the smaller display below the primary flight instruments. The IR image showed the night sky in false colour, temperature contrasts rendered in blues and whites and greys. And there, sliding across the upper field of view like a slow-moving cloud, was a shape, not a cloud. Clouds didn't have edges like that. Clouds didn't move in smooth, coordinated ways against the prevailing wind. Clouds didn't ripple. The object was oval, maybe circular, impossible to judge size without distance reference. Its surface undulated slowly, like tissue paper floating on water, and the temperature signature was cold, colder than the ambient air at 39,000 feet. "What is that?" Maya whispered. The IR display auto-scaled, blooming white for a moment as the camera tried to process the temperature differential, then stabilized. The object's outline persisted, drifting from right to left across their nose, 5 miles ahead, maybe 10, maybe higher. Impossible to tell. Maya reached for the radio. Her hand was steady. "Honolulu, Foxtrot 76, heavy request 10 right for a weather deviation." The response came through clean, the voice of Ian Becker, a controller Aaron had talked to 100 times crossing this ocean. "Foxtrot 76 heavy, deviation right approved when able resume route, no traffic observed." "Foxtrot 76 heavy, roger." Maya switched to intercom. "Should I tell him what we're seeing?" Aaron watched the EVS display. The object was still there, still moving, its edges rippling like something alive. "What are we seeing?" That was the question. An optical illusion? Some kind of ice crystal formation that looked solid on infrared? The radar blind spot suggested something physical, something dense enough to block or absorb radio waves. "Let's deviate south, give it space, and see what happens." Maya nodded and turned the heading bug 10 degrees right. The autopilot banked gently, the artificial horizon tilting. In Honolulu, Ian Becker was already querying adjacent sectors. No primary radar targets, no secondary, no ADS-B. The Pacific was empty except for Foxtrot 76, and according to every system he had, it should be that way. But years of watching screens had taught Becker that sometimes the radar missed things, that the ocean was big and full of unknowns. He made a note in the log and kept watching. Aaron felt his ears pop. The sensation was subtle, like a pressure change during descent, but the cabin altitude indicator hadn't moved. Still 7,700 feet. Pressurization differential steady at 7.9 psi. "You feel that?" he asked. Maya touched her jaw, working it side to side. "Yeah. Pressure change?" "Cabin altitude steady." The total air temperature gauge fluctuated, +2 Celsius, then -1, then back to nominal. The Mach number stayed locked at 0.80, no thrust change, no altitude change. And then Aaron felt it, a vibration in the yoke and rudder pedals, so low frequency it was almost subsonic. About 1 cycle per second, a slow pulse that travelled through the airframe like the aircraft was a tuning fork being struck very, very gently. "Are you getting that vibration?" Maya's hand was on the yoke. "Yeah, engines." She checked the engine instruments. EPR steady, N1 steady. No surges, no fluctuations. "Engines are fine," the vibration continued. That slow rhythmic pulse, and with it came a feeling Aaron couldn't name. Not fear exactly, but a profound sense of being watched, of being noticed, the way a minnow might feel when a shark's shadow passes overhead. The moon broke through. They'd been cruising in starlight, no moon visible, but suddenly a shaft of pale light cut across the windscreen from above, illuminating the inside of the cockpit with cold silver. And in that light, Aaron saw it. Above the storm tops, above the anvil that should have been the highest structure in the sky, something moved. It looked like a manta ray the size of a stadium. The comparison came unbidden, forced itself into his mind because the human brain needs metaphors to process the impossible. The thing was flattened, oval, with undulating edges that moved in slow peristaltic waves. Semi-translucent, like it was made of frosted glass or thin membrane, with darker veins or channels running through its structure. It had no lights, no navigation strobes, no landing lights, nothing that would identify it as human-made. But as Aaron watched, a soft blue pulse travelled from the leading edge to the trailing edge, like bioluminescence in deep ocean creatures, there and gone in 2 seconds. "Are you seeing this?" Maya's voice was barely audible. "I'm seeing it." The thing moved against the upper-level flow, drifting southwest, while the anvil winds aloft pushed northeast. It seemed to bank slightly, exposing an underside that was paler, that gathered the scattered moonlight like skin. Not metal, not composite. Skin. "We need to document this." Maya reached for her phone, hands shaking slightly. "FAA regs." "I don't care about regs right now." She raised the phone, pointed it through the windscreen and took 3 photos. The flash was disabled, airline policy to avoid reflections, but the camera captured the shape, dark against the stars, undulating. The ACARS chimed, an automated message uplink from Oakland. Maya read it and frowned. "Dispatch says we dropped off ADS-B for 6 seconds. That's not possible. We didn't change anything." ADS-B out was automatic. A broadcast of position, altitude and velocity sent every second via satellite and ground stations. For it to drop meant either transmitter failure or signal blockage. Aaron checked the overhead panel. ADS-B showed green, normal operation. "Multilateration must have lost lock," he said. But even as he spoke, he knew it was wrong. Multilateration was robust, used multiple satellites. For it to lose them completely, something would have to block line of sight to orbit. Something between them and the satellites. The EGPWS, Enhanced Ground Proximity Warning System, suddenly barked, "Terrain! Terrain!" Aaron's hand flew to the display. No terrain within 500 miles. They were over open ocean, nowhere near ground. Terrain, terrain, then silence. The warning cleared itself, reset, showed normal operation. "What was that?" Maya's voice was tight. "False alert." Aaron checked the radar altimeter. 39,000 feet above sea level, exactly where they should be. System might be... The terrain warning blipped again, a single chirp, then went silent. Might be reacting to something that's not terrain, Maya finished. The weather radar cone of blindness remained, a perfect void where the thing was positioned. Behind it, the storm painted clearly again, as if the blind spot moved with the object. It came through the hull like a whisper through walls, not loud, not dramatic. A broadband, wet, scraping noise that rose faintly in the cockpit lasted 13 seconds, then faded to nothing. Not engine noise. Aaron knew every sound this 767 made. Not hail, they were in clear air. Not airframe buffet, the ride was smooth. The sound was organic, biological, like something large dragging across something rough. It correlated exactly with the infrared object drifting overhead on the EVS display, passing from right to left across their nose. Maya was writing in the flight deck discrepancy log, her handwriting tight. Rolo 227Z. Unidentified environmental noise. Duration 13 sec, no apparent source. The cockpit voice recorder was capturing everything. Their voices, the radio calls, the ambient sounds. Later, someone would listen to this and they'd hear that noise and they'd have to explain it. Good luck with that, Aaron thought. I taste metal, Maya said. Aaron realised he did too. Metallic, like licking a battery, coating the back of his tongue. His stomach felt slightly wrong. Not quite nausea, just a sense of wrongness. Like motion sickness without the motion. You feel sick, he asked. Little bit. Not dizzy, just off. They were still in smooth air. No turbulence, no G-forces, nothing that should cause physical symptoms. But the taste was undeniable, and the queasiness persisted. Maya added it to the discrepancy log. Dorsuntuspisund 28Z. Both crew report metallic taste and mild nausea. No apparent cause. Cabin. Alt steady. Should we go on oxygen? She asked. Aaron considered it. Supplemental oxygen was standard for suspected fume events or pressurization issues, but all their instruments showed normal. Going on oxygen meant declaring an abnormality, starting a cascade of procedures and reports. Not yet. If symptoms increase, yes. The blue pulse travelled across the thing again, leading edge to trailing edge, soft bioluminescent glow against the stars. It was beautiful in a way that made Aaron deeply uncomfortable. The object banked. There was no other word for it. The undulating oval tilted, exposing its pale underside, and began to turn away from their flight path, sliding southwest at a steady rate. Banking implied control. Banking implied intention. Weather didn't bank, clouds didn't bank, balloons didn't bank like that. The thing moved with purpose, like a creature deciding it had seen enough and moving on. As it turned, the full underside came into view on the EVS display, paler than the upper surface, smooth except for what might have been vents or gills along the edge, structures that opened and closed in slow rhythm. The static wick crackle faded. The cockpit brightened as stars reappeared. The metallic taste began to fade from Aaron's mouth. On the weather radar, the cone of blindness collapsed. The storm to the north painted clearly again, unobstructed, normal convective returns showing textbook structure. The thing slid out of the EVS frame, moving steadily southwest, its pace suggesting something covering distance at maybe 100 knots, maybe less, impossible to judge without a reference. Then it was gone. Just empty sky, stars, and the distant anvil of the storm they were avoiding. Maya exhaled slowly. Did that just happen? Aaron's hands were tight on the yoke, even though the autopilot was flying. It happened. What do we tell ATC? That was the question. What do you report when you've just watched something the size of a stadium drift overhead at flight level 390? Something that didn't show on radar. Something that your infrared camera saw clearly. Something that banked and moved like it was alive. You report it carefully. Maya keyed the radio. Honolulu, Foxtrot 76 Heavy. Foxtrot 76 Heavy. Honolulu, go ahead. Honolulu, Foxtrot 76 Heavy. We encountered non-meteorological obscuration at flight level 390. Loss of radar returns for approximately 2 minutes. Light chop, no lightning. Request pirate be logged. There was a pause. Aaron could almost hear Ian Becker processing that sentence, trying to fit it into the standard categories of pilot reports. Foxtrot 7-6 Heavy. Copy non-met obscuration. Radar loss. Light chop. Payrep logged. Are you requesting any assistance? Negative, Honolulu. Conditions clear now. Continuing as filed. Roger. Foxtrot 7-6 Heavy. Payrep logged as weather anomalies. Weather anomalies. That's what it would be in the record. Safe. Bureaucratic. Easy to file. Maya switched back to intercom. Weather anomalies? Best description we've got, Aaron said. Unless you want to say giant living thing at FL 390. That'll get us a psych eval? Exactly. The Pacific stretched ahead, black and infinite. The storm was behind them now, offset by their deviation. Fuel state was good. Engines hummed normally. Everything was perfectly, completely normal. Except it wasn't. The ACARS chimed again. Message from Haley Park, the flight watch specialist at Oakland who monitored their oceanic crossing. Radar outage noted on board. Satellite shows no attenuation in your area. Advise. Maya typed a response. Encountered non-met obscuration. Radar affected. Duration 2, min now clear. Continuing. She attached the EVS still frames she'd captured, the infrared images showing the object's undulating outline. The file size was small, low resolution, compressed, but it showed something. The uplink failed. She tried again. Failed. Again. Third attempt, the message went through, but when the confirmation came back, it showed the thumbnail image with corrupted blocks along the object's outline, digital artifacts that made the edges look pixelated, less organic. Great, Maya muttered. Now it looks like a compression error. Aaron watched the message log. Send the photos from your phone when we land, original resolution. If we're allowed to. Why wouldn't we be? Maya met his eyes. Because someone's going to want to control the narrative on this. Aaron checked the fuel computer. Their deviation south had added 12 minutes to the flight time, but margins were still comfortable. They could continue on the amended route, avoiding the storm entirely, or resume the original track. Let's stay south, he said. No reason to go back near that weather. No reason to go back near where they'd seen it. Maya agreed and updated the flight plan. Oakland Oceanic approved the amendment without question. Foxtrot 7-6 continued southwest, then west, settling into the long cruise across the central Pacific. The rest of the flight was uneventful. Mild cirrus at one point, brushing the tops of flight level 370. Stable engines, normal communications. The autopilot flew the aircraft with the precision of a machine that didn't know or care what had just happened. But Aaron couldn't stop glancing at the EVS display, checking the infrared feed, looking for cold signatures that didn't belong. The screen stayed clear. June 13th, 2016. Taipei's morning was humid and bright. The sun already cooking the ramp as Foxtrot 7-6 shut down engines at the cargo terminal. Aaron completed the shutdown checklist with the automatic precision of someone who'd done it 10,000 times, but his mind was elsewhere. The company maintenance crew was waiting, which was unusual for a routine cargo arrival. Post-anomaly capture protocol, the lead mechanic said, climbing into the cockpit. We're pulling the CVR and DFDR, cockpit voice recorder and digital flight data recorder, the black boxes, though they were actually orange. Standard procedure after anything unusual, but Aaron had filed plenty of weather reports without anyone pulling the boxes. Who ordered the pull, he asked. Operations. It's in the system as priority capture. The mechanic worked quickly, removing panels, disconnecting cables, extracting the 2 orange boxes. They were heavy, ruggedized, designed to survive impacts and fires. Everything from the flight was in there. Every word spoken, every control input, every system parameter, every sound, including that wet scraping noise. A man in a dark blue polo shirt, airline security badge on his belt, appeared at the cockpit door. These go to bonded courier, he told the mechanic. Direct to Oakland, priority routing. Not the local maintenance base, not the regional office. Straight to headquarters. Aaron watched the boxes disappear into security cases. That's unusual. The security escort didn't meet his eyes. Just following procedures, Captain. June 15th, 2016. The conference room at the airline's Oakland headquarters smelled like new carpet and filtered air. Aaron and Maya sat on one side of the table, a digital recorder in the centre capturing everything. Across from them sat two people, Jennifer Wallace from Airline Flight Safety and Greg Lawson from the FAA, wearing slacks and a button-down that screamed federal investigator trying to look casual. Lawson had the box's data files on a laptop in front of him, but he hadn't opened them yet. "Let's start from the beginning," Wallace said. "You filed a PIREP for non-meteorological obscuration. Can you elaborate?" Aaron described the event carefully, sticking to observable facts. The dimming of starlight, the radar blind spot, the infrared detection, the physiological symptoms, the exit of the object to the southwest. "You used the word object," Lawson said. "It had defined edges and moved in a coordinated way. But you didn't see it visually? Only on infrared?" "We saw it visually when the moon came out. Maya photographed it." Lawson made a note. "We'll need those photos." Maya slid her phone across the table. Lawson examined the images, zoomed in, studied the dark shape against the stars. "Could this be ice crystals?" he asked. "Supercooled large droplets in the anvil outflow?" "Ice crystals don't bank," Maya said quietly. "Bank?" It changed orientation before moving away, like a coordinated turn. Lawson looked at Wallace. Something passed between them, some unspoken communication. "Let's talk about the physiological effects," Lawson continued. "Metallic taste, nausea, any history of similar symptoms, previous fume events on this aircraft?" "No." "Any cabin pressurization issues? All instruments normal?" Lawson walked them through every system, every reading, every possible mechanical explanation. He asked about ice crystal icing, radar attenuation geometry, temperature, inversions, optical phenomena. He never once used the word object again. He kept calling it the obscuration, the upper-level obscuration, the thermal event, the radar anomaly. Aaron understood what was happening. They were building a weather narrative. June 25th, 2016. The report came back from North Star, the atmospheric data contractor, that analysed the CVR, DFDR and EVS footage. Aaron read it in disbelief. EVS imagery shows thermal inversion artifact consistent with cold cirrus lensing. Temperature differential of to 15 degrees Celsius relative to ambient creates apparent solid structure in IR spectrum. Movement consistent with upper-level wind shear vectors. DFDR analysis shows no flight envelope exceedances, no system anomalies, normal engine parameters throughout event. CVR environmental noise consistent with precipitation shear and ice crystal impact on airframe. No anomalous audio sources detected. The report concluded with a recommendation. Adopt revised radar tilt standard operating procedures in high anvil environments to reduce blind spots caused by ice crystal backscatter geometry. Maya read over his shoulder. That's not what happened. That's the official version of what happened. Cold cirrus lensing, the thing moved against the wind. According to them, we misperceived wind vectors at altitude. And the banking, the undulating edges? Aaron closed the report. Thermal artifacts and parallax error. That's garbage. That's what we're stuck with. June 28th, 2016. The airline safety bulletin went out to all pilots. Temporary loss of weather radar returns due to anvil ice. Crystal backscatter geometry. Recent reports from Pacific routes have documented radar attenuation in high anvil environments with extreme ice crystal content. Crews should maintain heightened scan discipline and consider early deviation from anvil outflow regions. Attached training material includes EVS imagery examples. Aaron opened the attached slides. There was the EVS still frame, the one Maya had captured showing the object's outline. Cropped. The undulating edge was out of frame. The image showed only a fuzzy blob, thermal noise, exactly what you'd expect from ice crystals and temperature gradients. Anyone looking at this would see weather. The living, coordinated thing that had drifted above them at 39,000 feet had been edited into a cloud. July 10th, 2016. Aaron filed the request through the pilot union representative. Audio recording of HF and VHF communications from June 12th, 0215Z to 0235Z, Honolulu Center. It took 2 weeks to get approval, another week to receive the file. He listened to it alone in his home office, headphones on, volume up. His voice. Honolulu, Foxtrot 76. Heavy request 10 right for weather deviation. Becca's response, Foxtrot 76 heavy, deviation right approved. Standard calls, standard responses, but underneath, barely audible, a low-frequency hum that shouldn't be there. ATC audio was filtered, cleaned, optimized for voice clarity. Subsonic noise didn't make it through the recording chain, except this had. The hum lasted 6 seconds, pulsed once, then faded. Aaron's phone rang, unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Captain Cole? This is Ian Becker, from Honolulu Center. Aaron sat up. Controller Becker, what can I do for you? I'm off duty, calling from personal phone. I wanted to ask about your PIREP from June 12. The weather obscuration. A pause. Is that what you're calling it? That's what it got logged as. Another pause. 2 weeks before your flight, another crew filed a quiet PIREP. Different airline, similar route. They described... Becker chose his words carefully. A large silent mass above the anvil. No radar return. They didn't push it. Logged it as upper-level turbulence and moved on. Aaron's heart rate picked up. Did they document it? Not like you did. But when I saw your report, I remembered. 2 sightings, same area, 2 weeks apart. That's not coincidence. Did you file this observation? Informally. My supervisor wasn't interested. Said upper-level wind shear can look weird on radar. This wasn't wind shear. I know, Becker said quietly. I've been doing this 20 years. I know what wind shear looks like. This was something else. July 15th, 2016. Maya had access to a meteorology friend from her grad school days, someone who worked with satellite data processing. She asked him to pull Himawari 8-band 13 infrared data for June 12th, Uloshasus, point 15Z to Zerbstu 35Z, centered on 21 degrees north, 164 degrees west. The files came back massive high-resolution thermal imagery from the Japanese weather satellite that covered the Western Pacific. She processed the timestamps frame by frame at 02:24:30Z, exactly when they'd seen the moonlight break through. There it was. A well-shaped cold void at 39 to 41,000 feet, moving southwest at approximately 90 knots, moving counter to the wind vectors. Maya overlaid wind data from the satellite's motion vectors. Upper-level winds at FL 390 were northeasterly at 60 knots. The void was travelling southwest at 90 knots, opposite direction, faster speed. Not possible for any atmospheric phenomenon. The void was gone in the next frame 4 minutes later. Just vanished, like it had ascended or descended out of the thermal layer the satellite could detect. She showed Aaron the data. He stared at the screen, at the undeniable proof that something solid and cold had occupied that airspace, moving independently of the atmosphere. We need to document this, she said. Who do we send it to? FAA? NTSB? Someone who can investigate? Aaron thought about the North Star report, the cropped training images, the careful language in the safety bulletin. The airline already investigated, they called it weather. But this proves that someone with access to satellite data will see the same thing we saw, and they'll either call it an artifact, or they'll classify it, or they'll ignore it. So we do nothing, we keep the data, we document everything, and we wait for the next sighting. August 2016. Aaron couldn't let it go. He searched through military aviation records, declassified reports, anything that might reference unusual upper atmosphere sightings over the Pacific. Most of it was garbage. UFO conspiracy sites, misidentified aircraft, optical illusions. But buried in a database of digitized military manuals, he found something. A 1993 weather manual annex from a reconnaissance unit, describing flight operations over the Philippine Sea. One paragraph mentioned non-ballistic upper-level occlusions observed by crews during high-altitude missions. The annex cited no source, no photos, no data, no investigation findings. It ended with a classification marking, confidential, NFD. No foreign dissemination. The following paragraph was redacted, black bars covering 3 lines of text. Aaron saved the PDF, stored it in 3 places. September 2016. Maya received a message through the pilot bidding system, an internal email that shouldn't have been used for personal communication. The sender was a retired captain, someone she'd never met, who'd left the airline 5 years earlier. The message was brief. Heard you filed a report on the Pacific route. We used to call them sky whales. Old-timers knew. Keep your lights off, stay level, and don't chase the hole. You'll see them again, she replied, asking for more information. The message bounced back. Account closed. September 2016. The airline required both crew members to undergo medical evaluations after any event involving physiological symptoms. Aaron and Maya went to the company flight surgeon, underwent full workups. Everything came back normal. Blood work clean, no toxins, no elevated carbon monoxide markers. But Maya's audiogram showed something unusual, a narrow notch in her hearing response at 30 Hz. A small but measurable hearing loss at that specific frequency. The audiologist asked if she'd been exposed to loud low-frequency noise. She said no. Her previous physical, 6 months earlier, had shown normal hearing across all frequencies. The 30 Hz notch matched exactly the frequency of the subsonic vibration they'd felt through the yoke and pedals. Aaron's medical was normal except for one thing: elevated cortisol levels, stress hormones, the kind your body produces during threat response. The levels were consistent with someone who'd experienced acute danger 2 months prior and hadn't fully recovered. Any major stresses recently? The flight surgeon asked. Aaron thought about the thing drifting overhead, the size of a stadium, undulating against the stars. Just the usual job stress, he said. October 2016. Aaron formally requested the unedited EVS video through the Pilot Union Safety Committee. The airline's response came back through legal. EVS recordings are proprietary data processed by third-party contractor North Star under licensing agreement. Full resolution footage contains algorithmic watermarking and processing metadata protected by trade secret provisions. Edited footage provided in Safety Bulletin represents all information relevant to operational learning. In other words, no. Maya filed a similar request with the FAA under Freedom of Information Act provisions. The response took 6 weeks. Requested materials determined to contain proprietary commercial information exempt under 5 U.S.C. 552(b)(4). Additionally, materials related to ongoing safety analysis exempt under 5 U.S.C. 552(b)(5). No, again. The FAA's final memo, when it came in November, recommended no further action. The conclusion read, crew of Foxtrot 76 experienced upper-level optical effects and radar attenuation consistent with severe anvil ice crystal environment. No flight safety implications identified, no regulatory action required. File closed. Optical effects. The official story, stamped and sealed. November 2016. Maya's grad school contact called her, voice low, like he was worried about being overheard. I showed your satellite data to my supervisor, unofficially. And? He said we flag non-meteorological echoes all the time. Stuff that deforms anvil fields without any convective source. Things that show up cold on IR but don't match any atmospheric model. What does he think they are? A long pause. He said there's a classification bucket in the system. NMEB, non-meteorological echo, biological signature. He wouldn't say more, said upper air life is above his pay grade. Upper air life? His words. Then he told me to delete the conversation and not ask again. The line went dead. December 2016. Aaron was reviewing his employment contract for an unrelated matter when he noticed a clause in the Atmospheric Services Agreement, the section covering the airline's relationship with North Star. Most of it was standard boilerplate about data sharing, processing protocols, liability limitations. But one sentence stood out. contractor may share unique upper-level biological signatures with partner agencies for research purposes, subject to confidentiality provisions and national security classifications. Upper-level biological signatures. The phrase appeared nowhere else in the contract. No definition, no context, just that one line buried in Section 12, subsection D, paragraph 4. Aaron photographed the page with his phone. He sent it to Maya with no message. She replied, "They know." 1 year later, same route, June 8th, 2017, different weather day. Scattered high cirrus, no convective activity. Clean stars from horizon to horizon. Aaron was back on the Honolulu-Taipei run, different aircraft, same route. Maya was on a different schedule, flying domestic. He had a new first officer, a quiet kid from Texas who was still learning the Pacific. At flight level 390, the air was smooth. Weather radar showed nothing but distant wisps of moisture. TCAS clear. Everything normal. Then the cockpit dimmed. Aaron's hands went immediately to the controls, though the autopilot was still engaged. "What was that?" the first officer asked. "Watch the EVS," Aaron said. He brought up the infrared display. There, sliding across the upper field of view, was the familiar cold signature. Oval shape, undulating edges, moving slowly from north to south, crossing ahead of them at maybe 10 miles. The static wicks began their faint crackle. "What is that?" First officer whispered. Aaron adjusted the weather radar tilt, keeping it indexed 2 degrees down to avoid losing the paint on distant weather. He added a shallow 5-degree bank to the right, moving them away from the object's track without making it obvious. "Upper-level ice crystals," Aaron said calmly. "Causes radar attenuation. We'll give it space." The object pulsed once. That soft blue bioluminescent glow travelling from leading edge to trailing edge, then slid away to the south. The stars returned. The static stopped. The first officer was staring at the EVS display. "Ice crystals don't move like that." "No," Aaron agreed, "they don't." "Should we report it?" Aaron thought about the safety bulletin, the cropped images, the closed FA file, the clause about biological signatures buried in the contract. Log it as upper-level attenuation. Request a slight deviation for smooth air, keep it simple. But they already know, Aaron said quietly. "Trust me, they know." June 9th, 2017. In his hotel room in Taipei, unable to sleep, Aaron opened his laptop and typed an email to himself. He wouldn't send it anywhere, just document it. Keep the record. If these are living, they ride the temperature gradient and feed on charge differentials along anvil crowns. They migrate through the upper atmosphere like whales through ocean currents, following the energy, following the storms. We didn't encounter a machine or a craft. We crossed a migration path. Someone knows. The satellite networks see them. The military reconnaissance crews have seen them for decades. The atmospheric contractors classify the data and feed it into some database that we'll never access. We keep calling it weather so the paperwork stays simple, so passengers don't panic, so pilots don't sound crazy, so the enormity of what's living up there doesn't force us to reconsider everything we think we know about our planet. But they're real. They're alive. And they've been here the whole time, drifting through the spaces between storms, invisible except to the right sensors, noticed only by the people who spend their lives at 39,000 feet. We share the sky with them, and we pretend we don't. He saved the file, encrypted it, backed it up to 3 different locations. Then he closed the laptop and tried to sleep. The instructor advanced to the next slide in the recurrent training presentation. Upper-level attenuation in anvil outflow, maintain scan discipline, deviate early. The slide showed the EVS still frame, carefully cropped. Just a fuzzy thermal blob, edges pixelated, looking like any other weather phenomenon. But in the corner, if you looked closely, you could see where the crop ended. A soft, undulating edge with a faint internal structure that caught the light differently than ice crystals ever could. A hint of blue glow, barely visible in the compressed image. The pilots in the classroom dutifully took notes. Most of them had never seen anything unusual at altitude. They filed the information away as just another weather hazard, another thing to avoid. But a few, the ones who'd flown the Pacific routes for years, the ones who'd seen their radar go blind in clear air, the ones who'd felt that subsonic vibration through the yoke and tasted metal and watched something massive drift overhead in the starlight. Those pilots looked at the cropped image and understood. The instructor moved to the next slide without comment. Outside the training centre, the sky was bright and clear and empty. Or so it appeared. At 39,000 feet, where the air is thin and cold, and the stars shine without atmosphere to dim them, the migration continued. Silent, living, undocumented, crossing the ocean at the speed of wind, riding the storms, feeding on the charge differential between cloud and sky, moving through their ancient paths while below them, humans in aluminum tubes pretended not to see. The sky whales, some pilots called them. The file said upper-level biological signatures. The report said weather. But Aaron Cole knew what he'd seen, and he knew he'd see it again. Because once you've looked up at flight level 390 and realised the empty air isn't empty, you can't unknow it. You just learn to fly around it, and you keep the lights off, and you don't chase the hole. And you remember that the ocean of air we live in has its own creatures, its own mysteries, its own life. And mostly, you remember to keep your mouth shut, file the paperwork, and let the system reduce the impossible to a weather report. Because up there in the thin cold dark between Earth and space, some things are better left unclassified. Some things are better left as echo. Have you ever wondered why ancient monuments across the globe seem to align with mathematical precision? Why your GPS glitches in certain locations? Or why governments classify research about electromagnetic anomalies? Tonight's story might make you question every map you've ever trusted. Before we begin this journey into the hidden grid beneath our feet, I want to thank M10 Rapin for suggesting this topic. Your video ideas fuel these late-night tales, so please leave your suggestions in the comments below. And if you're ready to uncover the mysteries that keep you awake at night, make sure to like and subscribe to Sleep Theories. Now, dim your lights, settle in, and prepare to discover the truth about the lines that connect our world. My name is Alex Morrison, and I used to believe maps told the truth. As a GIS analyst, that's Geographic Information Systems for those who don't spend their days staring at satellite data and topographical overlays, I thought I understood how the world was organised. Cities here, mountains there, rivers cutting through valleys in predictable patterns carved by millions of years of erosion. Everything had a logical explanation. Everything could be mapped, measured and catalogued. That was before I found the pattern. It started innocently enough. Tuesday morning, October 15th, 8:47 a.m. I was hunched over my dual monitors in a cramped office in Brussels, working for Steinberg Construction Consortium. They'd hired me to evaluate potential sites for a new high-speed rail corridor that would connect Prague to Paris, part of the EU's Green Transportation Initiative. Routine work, overlay environmental data, check for protected sites, identify geological challenges. I'd done it 100 times before, but this time something was different. I was cross-referencing archaeological databases with our proposed route when I noticed it. A series of Neolithic monuments, stone circles, burial mounds, ancient wells, formed an almost perfect line across the landscape. Not just a few sites clustered together, but dozens of them, stretching for hundreds of miles. The proposed railway cut directly across this invisible corridor. At first, I laughed it off. Pattern recognition gone wild, I told myself. The human brain loves to find connections when none exist. But then I pulled up the magnetic anomaly data from the European Space Agency's swarm satellites. The coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. The magnetic variations followed the exact same line. Every single monument sat on a point of electromagnetic disturbance. The precision was impossible. We're talking about structures built 5,000 years apart by cultures that supposedly never interacted, aligned to within meters of a magnetic corridor that modern science had only just detected. I should have deleted the file, should have marked the route as approved and moved on with my life. Instead, I zoomed out. The line didn't stop at the edge of my survey area. It continued east through Romania, Turkey, Iran, west through England, across the Atlantic. I pulled up global archaeological databases, my fingers trembling as I plotted point after point. Stonehenge, Avebury, the Externstein, the Oracle at Delphi. Each site fell perfectly along extended trajectories of the same geometric pattern. My phone buzzed. A text from my supervisor. "Morrison, railway assessment due by noon. Stop whatever rabbit hole you're going down." But I couldn't stop. I'd found something that shouldn't exist. A planetary grid mapped by ancient peoples who supposedly thought the Earth was flat, following electromagnetic patterns we'd only discovered in the last century. Either I was losing my mind or I'd stumbled onto the greatest archaeological discovery of the millennium. I chose to believe the latter. That was my first mistake. 3 weeks later, I stood in a frost-covered field 40 kilometres outside Prague, watching my equipment fail in ways that defied every principle of engineering I knew. After discovering the alignment, I'd convinced Steinberg to let me conduct field surveys along the proposed route. Geological stability assessment, I'd called it. What I really wanted was to stand on one of these intersection points myself, to take readings that might explain how ancient peoples had detected magnetic anomalies without compasses or magnetometers. The morning had started normally enough. I'd parked my van on a dirt road near the village of Holubice, unloaded my survey equipment, and hiked 2 kilometres to the first monument site, a circle of weathered standing stones that locals called Devil's Dance. The temperature hovered just above freezing, and mist clung to the valleys like cotton wool. I set up my differential GPS unit first, waiting for it to lock onto satellites. The device chirped, showing full signal strength. Then, as I walked toward the centre of the stone circle, the screen flickered. Acquiring satellites. Signal lost. Acquiring satellites. I checked my phone. Same problem. The GPS app showed my location jumping wildly, placing me first in Prague, then Vienna, then somehow in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. My professional-grade survey unit, accurate to within centimetres under normal conditions, couldn't even determine which continent I was on. The electromagnetic field meter came next. The moment I switched it on, the needle slammed against the maximum reading and stayed there, quivering like it was fighting against invisible restraints. I'd seen similar readings near power lines or transformer stations, but we were in the middle of farmland. The nearest electrical infrastructure was kilometres away. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. An elderly woman stood at the edge of the field, wrapped in a thick wool shawl. Her face was deeply lined, her eyes the pale blue of winter sky. "I'm sorry," I called out in my broken Czech. She switched to accented English. "This place. It's not for outsiders, not for their machines." She gestured at my equipment with a gnarled finger. "I'm just conducting surveys for the railway," I explained, walking toward her. "Making sure the ground is stable." She laughed, but there was no humour in it. "Stable? This line has been here since before the first stones were raised. Before your railways, before your cities. Our ancestors knew to respect it, to build their monuments as, jak se říká, anchors, to keep the energy flowing properly." "Energy?" I pulled out my tablet, showing her the magnetic anomaly map. "You mean this? You know about the electromagnetic patterns?" Her eyes widened. For a moment she looked genuinely frightened. "You've mapped it? The whole grid?" She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "You must stop. Some knowledge isn't meant to be documented. They will come for you if you continue." "Who will come?" But she was already walking away, moving faster than seemed possible for someone her age. "The ones who already know," she called back. "The ones who've always known." I wanted to follow her, to demand answers, but my drone chose that moment to fall out of the sky. No warning, no gradual descent. 1 second it was hovering steadily, the next it dropped like a stone, smashing into the frozen ground 20 meters away. As I ran to retrieve it, I noticed something through the trees, a structure that didn't belong. Hidden behind a thick stand of pines was a concrete building, brutalist in design, with narrow windows like suspicious eyes. Military architecture, Cold War era by the look of it. The smart thing would have been to leave immediately. Instead, I collected my broken drone and hiked toward the building. The structure was abandoned but not ancient. Rust streaked the metal door, which hung open on failing hinges. Inside, fluorescent lights dangled from exposed wiring, and the walls were covered in mould that formed patterns like continental drift. But it was the maps that stopped me cold. The entire north wall was covered in them. Topographical maps, geological surveys, electromagnetic readings, layers upon layers of data, some dating back to the 1960s. Red strings connected pins at various locations, creating a web that stretched across Europe. And running through it all, marked in thick black ink, was the same line I'd found, the same impossible alignment. In the corner, barely legible, someone had written, "Earth Grid Project, classified, destroy after review." I pulled out my phone to photograph everything, but the camera wouldn't focus. Every image came out distorted, as if the very air in the room was bending light. I tried sketching what I saw instead, my hands shaking from more than cold. A metal filing cabinet in the corner had been forced open, its contents mostly removed or destroyed. But wedged behind the bottom drawer I found a single folder. Water damage had made most of it illegible, but I could make out fragments. Electromagnetic conductivity peaks at intersection points. Ancient structures appear to function as regulatory nodes. Catastrophic potential if grid destabilizes. Project terminated by Joint Commission directive. The last page was a photograph, grainy but unmistakable. It showed a massive antenna array in what looked like Alaska, the same distinctive design I'd seen in conspiracy documentaries about HAARP. But this photo was dated 1971, decades before HAARP officially existed. The sound outside made me freeze, the crunch of footsteps on frost. Multiple sets, moving with military precision. I shoved the folder inside my jacket and slipped out the back window, dropping into a thorny hedge that tore at my clothes. Through the trees, I could see dark vehicles pulling up to the building, men in unmarked uniforms spreading out to surround it. I ran, not toward my van, they'd certainly have someone watching it, but deeper into the forest, following a deer trail that wound toward the next village. Behind me I heard shouting in a language I didn't recognize, not Czech, not German, something else. It took me 4 hours to circle back to my vehicle, approaching from the opposite direction through farmland. The van was untouched, but I knew they'd let me go, let me run. They wanted to see what I'd do next, who I'd contact. As I drove away, hand steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, I realised the old woman had been right. Some knowledge wasn't meant to be documented, but it was too late now. I'd seen the grid, seen evidence that governments knew about it, had studied it, had classified it, and I was going to find out why. My apartment in Brussels became a command centre for obsession. After the encounter at Holobici, I'd returned to work, filed a bland report recommending further geological assessment, and pretended everything was normal. But every evening, I locked my door, pulled the blinds, and dove deeper into the mystery. The coffee table disappeared under printed maps. The walls became a spider web of string and pins connecting sites across continents. I'd stopped sleeping more than 3 hours a night, surviving on espresso and the electric thrill of discovery. The pattern was everywhere once you knew how to look. Start with the obvious ones, the monuments everyone knows, the pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, Easter Island. Plot them on a globe, not a flat map, and they formed geometric relationships so precise they could have been placed by satellite guidance. The Great Pyramid sits at the exact centre of Earth's landmass. Easter Island is antipodal to the Indus Valley civilization sites. Angkor Wat, the Nazca Lines, and Easter Island form a perfect Great Circle route, but those were just the famous nodes. The real revelation came when I started plotting lesser-known sites. Every major ancient city sat on the grid. Babylon, Persepolis, Constantinople, Carthage, all built at intersection points where multiple energy lines converged. The Romans, master engineers, had built their road system following these same invisible highways. The Silk Road traced a major east-west corridor. Even modern cities clustered around the same points: New York, London, Tokyo, Cairo. It wasn't random. It couldn't be. I pulled declassified documents from every database I could access. The US Freedom of Information Act, the UK National Archives, leaked Soviet files from the fall of the USSR. Most of it was useless. Budget reports, personnel transfers, bureaucratic minutiae. But buried in the noise were fragments of something bigger. Project Stargate, the CIA's remote viewing program, included maps marking psychic hotspots that matched my grid lines perfectly. Operation Paperclip scientists had studied Earth radiation patterns in the 1950s. The Soviets had run something called Program Sputnik Grid that involved placing sensors at ancient monument sites across their territory. The most intriguing find came from a 1962 Canadian military report about the construction of the DEW line, the distant early warning radar system across the Arctic. An engineer named Captain Lawrence Brennan had noted persistent electromagnetic anomalies at certain locations that required special shielding for equipment. His proposed sites for radar stations, plotted on my grid, formed a perfect arc along a major ley line. But the document that changed everything was a leaked memo from 1997, source unknown, that had circulated on conspiracy forums before being scrubbed from most of the internet. I found it cached on an obscure Russian server. 2. Joint Chiefs Special Projects Division Aura. Earth grid stability concerns. Recent seismic activity correlates with disruption of natural electromagnetic corridors via urban development and mineral extraction. Recommendation: establish monitoring stations at key intersection points under cover of telecommunications infrastructure. See attached list of priority sites. The attached list was gone, but the implication was clear. They knew. The military, the intelligence agencies, the energy companies, they all knew about the grid, and they were using it. I started mapping modern installations against the ley lines. The correlation was undeniable. HARP in Alaska, ISCAT in Norway, Sura in Russia, Arecibo in Puerto Rico. Every major ionospheric research facility sat directly on an intersection point. The Large Hadron Collider at CERN traced a circle around one of the most powerful convergent zones in Europe. Nuclear power plants clustered along the lines. Major military bases were built at intersection points. Even the routes of underground fibre optic cables followed the ancient paths, as if modern engineers were unconsciously drawn to the same energy corridors their ancestors had marked with standing stones. My phone rang at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Unknown number. Stop digging. The voice was electronically distorted, genderless. Who is this? Someone trying to help you. You found the grid. Congratulations. Now forget about it before you end up like the others. What others? Bruce Cathy, John Michel, Ivan Sanderson, all the researchers who got too close to the truth. Heart attacks, car accidents, sudden illnesses. Very convenient. My blood chilled. I knew those names. Independent researchers from the 60s and 70s who'd written about Earth energy grids all died relatively young under questionable circumstances. Why are you warning me? Because the grid is destabilizing. The ancients built monuments as regulators, keeping the energy in balance. Modern construction is disrupting the flow. Mumbai, 2006. Haiti, 2010. Fukushima, 2011. Those weren't random natural disasters. They were pressure releases along fractured ley lines. That's impossible. Electromagnetic fields don't cause earthquakes. The voice laughed, bitter and electronic. The electromagnetic fields are just what we can measure. The grid is deeper than that. It's the planet's nervous system, its circulation. and we're giving it a stroke, one skyscraper at a time. Then we need to warn people. With what evidence? Mystical energy lines, ancient wisdom. You'll be dismissed as a crackpot. Unless ... The voice paused. Unless you can prove the energy is real, measurable, usable. How? Return to the grid, not with standard equipment that's designed to filter out the frequencies you need to detect. Build your own sensor. Copper coils, crystal oscillators, very specific specifications. I'm sending you the plans now. My laptop pinged with an encrypted file. One more thing, the voice said. When you record the surge, you'll have about 6 hours before they track the signature back to you. Use that time wisely. The line went dead. I opened the file. The schematic looked like something Tesla might have designed after a fever dream. Multiple copper coils in a complex geometric arrangement, connected to crystal oscillators and frequency analyzers. The materials list was surprisingly mundane, everything available from electronic suppliers. It took me 3 days to build it, working in secret in a rented storage unit outside the city. The device looked like abstract art more than scientific equipment, all gleaming copper spirals and crystal matrices. But when I powered it on, every LED lit up green. It was detecting something. Now I just had to be crazy enough to test it. The academic forum was my first mistake. Well, second, if you count building the sensor. But hubris makes fools of us all, and I needed someone, anyone, to verify I wasn't losing my mind. Geoanomalies.net was a small community, mostly graduate students and professional geologists sharing unusual findings. I created a throwaway account and posted a conservative summary. Electromagnetic anomalies correlating with ancient monument placement, seeking peer review. I attached 3 images, my overlay map of European sites, a graph showing magnetic field fluctuations, and 1 photo from the abandoned military outpost with the classified stamps carefully cropped out. Within an hour, I had 2 responses. A geology professor from Munich confirmed similar observations near Bronze Age sites. A student from Oxford posted links to academic papers about telluric currents, natural electrical currents that flow through the Earth's crust. Then, 90 minutes after posting, my thread vanished. Not deleted with a removed by moderator message. Gone, like it had never existed. The cached version on Google disappeared. The other users who'd responded found their comments erased from their own post histories. My laptop screen flickered. A chat window opened without my input. Admin. Your recent activity has been flagged for review. Me. What activity? Who is this? Admin. Consider this a courtesy warning. Cease your current research immediately. Me. Or what? Admin. Or we stop being courteous. The chat window closed itself. When I tried to screenshot the conversation, my laptop blue-screened. It took 20 minutes to restart, and when it did, my hard drive had been wiped. Not formatted, wiped. Every sector overwritten with random data multiple times. A technique that made recovery impossible. Thank God for cloud backups, I thought, logging into my secure server. Empty. 3 years of research, gone. Even my email accounts had been purged. I still had physical copies of the most important findings, hidden in a safety deposit box across town. But the message was clear. They could reach me anywhere, any time. The next morning I arrived at work to find my keycard deactivated. Security escorted me to a conference room where my supervisor, Mr. Steinberg himself, sat with 2 people I'd never seen before. A woman in a severe black suit and a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite, both with a kind of posture that screamed military. Alex, Steinberg began, sweating despite the air conditioning. These representatives from the European Infrastructure Security Division have some concerns about your recent surveys. I'd never heard of the European Infrastructure Security Division. I doubted it existed on any official registry. The woman smiled without warmth. Mr. Morrison, your work on the railway project has been exemplary. However, we've noticed some unusual patterns in your research that fall outside the project's scope. I'm thorough, I said. I investigate all factors that might affect construction, including archaeological sites hundreds of kilometres from the proposed route. The man's accent was impossible to place. including electromagnetic phenomena that have no bearing on rail safety. I believe they do have bearing. What you believe is irrelevant. The woman pulled out a tablet showing my deleted forum post. Discussing classified military research on public forums is a serious offence. Classified? I found those maps in an abandoned... Mr. Morrison... Her voice could have frozen helium. You're being terminated from this project, effective immediately. Your severance package is generous, contingent on signing this NDA. She slid a document across the table. You'll cease all research related to electromagnetic anomalies, ancient monuments, or what you call ley lines. Any violation will result in prosecution under the European Security Act. I looked at Steinberg. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And if I refuse? The man leaned forward. Your visa expires in 6 weeks. Your bank accounts are already frozen pending investigation of potential fraud. Your academic credentials are under review. Would you like me to continue? The threat was clear. Sign and walk away with something or lose everything and possibly face imprisonment. I signed. They confiscated my company laptop, my access badges, even my parking pass. The woman handed me a business card with no name, just a phone number. If you remember any details you'd like to share about your research, call this number. We reward cooperation. I was escorted out of the building like a criminal, my colleagues staring as security watched me pack my desk. The personal items fit in a single cardboard box, a coffee mug, some photos, a stress ball shaped like Earth. They even checked those before letting me leave. On the tram ride home, I noticed the man 3 seats back. Grey coat, newspaper held too high, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. When I got off 2 stops early, he followed. When I ducked into a cafe, he positioned himself across the street. They were watching me. Fine, let them watch. That night I made a decision. If they wanted to threaten me, surveil me, erase my work, they'd already shown their hand. Whatever was hidden in the Earth's electromagnetic grid was important enough to destroy careers over, which meant it was important enough to risk everything to expose. I had one advantage. The sensor I'd built was hidden in the storage unit, registered under a false name paid in cash. They didn't know about it yet. The anonymous contact had said I'd have 6 hours after recording the surge before they tracked it. 6 hours to gather proof and upload it somewhere they couldn't reach. I started planning. The winter solstice seemed appropriate. December 21st, the longest night of the year, when ancient monuments worldwide align with celestial events. If the Earth's energy grid responded to cosmic cycles, this would be the night to prove it. I chose a site carefully, the intersection of 3 major ley lines near Carnac in Brittany, France. The famous stone rows there were just the visible part of a massive Neolithic complex, most of it on private land away from tourist routes. I'd identified a specific confluence point in a forest grove, marked by a small standing stone unknown to archaeology. The 2-week preparation was meticulous. I withdrew cash gradually, never more than €200 at a time, bought a used van with fake registration, gathered camping equipment, emergency supplies, and most importantly a satellite internet transmitter that could upload directly to multiple servers simultaneously. They were still watching me in Brussels, but their surveillance had grown lazy. Same operative, same patterns. On December 19th, I led him on a boring tour of grocery stores and laundromats, then slipped out the back of a cinema showing a 3-hour film. By the time he realised I was gone, I was already crossing into France on secondary roads. The grove near Carnac was exactly as satellite images had shown, a circle of ancient oaks surrounding a moss-covered menhir about 2 metres tall. The stone was carved with spiral patterns worn nearly smooth by millennia of weather. When I placed my hand on it, I felt a subtle vibration, like standing near a massive subwoofer playing below human hearing. I set up the sensor array according to the anonymous blueprints. Copper coils arranged in a complex mandala, crystal oscillators at specific angles, the whole apparatus connected to recording equipment and the satellite uplink. If this worked, data would stream to servers in 12 countries simultaneously. As sunset approached, my conventional instrument started showing anomalies. The magnetometer detected fluctuations in a rhythmic pattern, almost like a heartbeat. The frequency analyzer picked up ultra-low sounds below 7 Hz, the range that some researchers claim can induce altered states of consciousness. Then the sun touched the horizon, and everything changed. The copper coils began resonating, producing a tone that I felt more than heard. The crystals started glowing with a faint blue luminescence, not reflected light, but actual emission. The recording equipment went haywire, needles dancing across their maximum ranges. At the moment of sunset, 5:47 p.m. local time, the surge hit. The ground beneath me vibrated like a struck bell. The standing stone lit up with phosphorescent patterns, spirals of light racing across its surface following the ancient carvings. The air itself seemed to thicken, taking on a golden quality that made everything appear to be underwater. My body felt weightless, not floating, but as if gravity had simply forgotten about me. I watched my hand rise without conscious thought, fingers spreading to touch the charged air. Electricity danced between my fingertips, not painful, but ecstatic, like every nerve was firing with pure information. The sensor array was screaming data into the satellite feed, electromagnetic readings off the scale, gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist, temperature fluctuations that defied thermodynamics, all of it streaming live to servers worldwide, impossible to suppress or delete simultaneously. Through the golden haze I saw them, spheres of light moving through the forest. Not aircraft, not drones, perfect orbs of luminescence following the ley line like trains on invisible tracks. They moved silently, purposefully, some the size of basketballs, others as large as cars. One passed directly over me, and for a moment I felt connected to something vast, a network of energy that wrapped the planet like neural pathways. The revelation hit me all at once. The ley lines weren't just electromagnetic corridors, they were conscious. Not alive exactly, but aware. The Earth itself was a single vast organism, and these lines were its sensory network, its method of experiencing and responding to everything on its surface. The ancient builders hadn't just discovered the grid, they'd communicated with it. Their monuments were interface points, allowing human consciousness to merge temporarily with planetary awareness. That's why sacred sites induced religious experiences. That's why people felt transformed at these locations. And now, modern civilization was damaging this network. Every skyscraper driven deep into the earth, every mine boring through the corridors, every electromagnetic broadcast interfering with the natural frequencies, we were giving the planet the equivalent of nerve damage. The surge peaked at 6:13 p.m, lasting exactly 26 minutes. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The lights vanished. The stone went dark. My equipment powered down simultaneously, despite having hours of battery remaining. In the sudden silence, I heard vehicles approaching. Many vehicles. I grabbed the memory cards from the recording equipment and ran. Behind me, floodlights blazed to life, turning the grove into harsh daylight. Voices shouted in multiple languages. A helicopter thundered overhead, its searchlights sweeping through the trees. But I'd prepared for this. My real van was hidden 2 kilometers away. The one by the grove was a decoy, purchased for this specific purpose. While they surrounded it, I was already driving down back roads toward a safe house I'd arranged weeks earlier. The data had uploaded successfully. 87 gigabytes of impossible readings that proved the Earth's energy grid was real, measurable, and more powerful than anyone imagined. Within hours, it would be mirrored on servers worldwide, impossible to suppress completely. But as I drove through the darkness, one thought haunted me. If the grid was conscious, if the Earth itself was aware, what did it think of what we were doing to it? And more terrifyingly, how long before it decided to stop tolerating us? The safe house was a converted barn in the Pyrenees, owned by a conspiracy theorist named Marcus, who'd contacted me through encrypted channels after my data went live. He believed the government was controlling weather through chemtrails, which was absurd, but he also had solar panels, satellite internet, and absolutely no trust in authority. Exactly what I needed. For 3 days, I watched my findings ripple across the internet. Alternative news sites ran with headlines like, "Proof Earth's secret energy grid exposed. Scientists on Twitter debated the data's authenticity. Skeptics called it an elaborate hoax, but enough people with credentials were taking it seriously that mainstream media couldn't ignore it entirely. Then Marcus knocked on my door at dawn on the 4th day. "You have a visitor, says you're expecting him." I wasn't expecting anyone. The man standing in Marcus's kitchen looked like a university professor from the 1970s. Corduroy jacket with elbow patches, wild grey hair, thick glasses repaired with tape. He was drinking tea from a chipped mug and studying my printed data with intense focus. "Mr. Morrison," he said without looking up, "my name is Professor Emanuel Richter. I'm the one who sent you the sensor blueprints." The anonymous contact. I studied him carefully. "How did you find me?" "The same way they'll find you eventually, the satellite uplink signature. But I know how to mask my movements. 30 years of practice." He finally looked at me, his eyes sharp behind the thick lenses. "Your data is magnificent, but you're missing the larger picture." "Enlighten me!" He pulled out a battered laptop and opened a file filled with equations I couldn't begin to understand. "The ley lines aren't just electromagnetic. That's merely the aspect we can measure with current technology. They're multi-dimensional conduits, channels through space-time itself. That's impossible. So is your gravitational anomaly data, yet there it is." He pulled up a world map covered in glowing lines. Every ancient culture had different names for it. Chi in China, Prana in India, Pneuma in Greece. They were all describing the same phenomenon, a fundamental force that mainstream physics hasn't acknowledged. Why hasn't physics acknowledged it? Richter laughed bitterly. Because those who discover it either join the suppression or disappear. I was part of the suppression for 20 years. He told me his story. In 1973, fresh from MIT with a PhD in theoretical physics, he'd been recruited by a Defense Department think tank. His job, investigate anomalous energy readings at ancient sites worldwide. Within 2 years, his team had mapped the basic structure of the Earth grid and realised its potential. "Unlimited clean energy," he said. "Instantaneous communication across any distance. Even manipulation of localised space-time." The military applications were obvious, but so were the benefits for humanity. We could have transformed civilization. What happened? We succeeded. His face darkened. The first experimental tap into a ley line intersection was in Nevada, 1978. We pulled enough energy in 30 seconds to power Las Vegas for a year. Then the intersection point destabilized. He showed me a classified photo, a perfectly circular crater 300 meters across, the sand turned to glass. The official record lists it as an underground nuclear test, but no bomb did that. We'd ruptured something fundamental in the grid structure. The project was immediately classified beyond top secret. Research continued, but focused on weaponization rather than energy production. HARP, Richter explained, wasn't about weather modification or mind control. Those were cover stories. It was about learning to manipulate the grid without destabilizing it. "But they're failing," he continued. "Every year more intersection points become unstable. The Haiti earthquake, the Japanese tsunami, the increase in volcanic activity, they're all symptoms of grid breakdown. Caused by what? Everything. Mining operations cutting through ley lines, fracking disrupting deep conduits, cities spreading concrete over intersection points. But the worst damage comes from electromagnetic pollution, cellular towers, Wi-Fi, satellite transmissions. We're drowning out the Earth's natural frequency." He pulled up another image, a graph showing electromagnetic background radiation over time. It had increased 10,000-fold since 1900. "The ancients understood balance," Richter said. "Their monuments weren't just markers, they were regulators. Stone circles amplified and stabilized the energy. Pyramids acted as capacitors, storing excess power. Temple complexes provided controlled release points. It was a planetary management system maintained for thousands of years. Until we forgot, until we were made to forget." His expression hardened. The knowledge was deliberately suppressed, first by religions that wanted monopolies on spiritual experience, then by governments that wanted monopolies on power, now by corporations that profit from scarcity. A car engine growled outside. Marcus appeared in the doorway, shotgun in hand. 3 black SUVs coming up the mountain road. Richter stood calmly. They tracked me, not you. I've been sloppy, getting old, I suppose. He handed me a flash drive. Everything I couldn't publish, 40 years of research, the complete grid map, the frequency specifications, the names of everyone involved in the cover-up. Come with me, I said. We can both run. I'm 73 years old, Mr. Morrison. I've been running since 1991. He smiled sadly. But information wants to be free. Upload that data everywhere. Send it to journalists, scientists, anyone who'll listen. Make it impossible to suppress. The vehicles were getting closer. Marcus was already at his truck, engine running. Richter walked to the door, then turned back. One more thing. The grid isn't just breaking down, it's evolving. The electromagnetic pollution we're producing is forcing it to adapt, to develop new pathways. The lights you saw at Karnak, they're increasing worldwide. The grid is trying to heal itself, but if we don't stop interfering, he shook his head, the Earth will protect itself, even if that means eliminating the infection. We're the infection? From the planet's perspective? Yes. He walked out to meet the SUVs. I ran to Marcus's truck and we tore down the back road as fast as the ancient vehicle could manage. In the mirrors, I saw men in tactical gear surrounding the farmhouse. Richter stood in the doorway, hands raised, dignity intact, even in surrender. We drove for 6 hours, changing vehicles twice, before I felt safe enough to stop. In a roadside motel that still used actual keys, I opened Richter's flash drive. The data was staggering. Detailed maps of every ley line intersection on Earth. Energy readings from 6 decades of secret monitoring. Photos of ancient sites I'd never heard of, all showing the same telltale signs of grid integration. And a list of names. Politicians, CEOs, military leaders, all aware of the grid's existence, all complicit in hiding it. But most importantly, there were the repair protocols. Richter's team had developed methods to stabilize damaged intersection points, to restore the grid's natural balance, the knowledge to undo decades of damage, the blueprints for saving the planet's nervous system. The cafe in Prague is busy enough that I blend in, anonymous among the tourists and students. My laptop is connected through 7 proxy servers, my identity masked by layers of encryption that would make the NSA proud. The barista brings my 3rd espresso of the morning, and I nod my thanks without looking up from the screen. The world has changed since Karnak. Not visibly. The same traffic jams clog the streets, the same politicians make the same promises, the same corporations chase the same profits. But underneath, in the invisible currents that connect all things, something fundamental has shifted. Richter's data didn't just expose the conspiracy, it provided a roadmap for resistance. The first wave of releases came through WikiLeaks, the Panama Papers network, and a dozen smaller journalism outlets simultaneously. By the time the suppression teams realised the scope of the leak, copies were already spreading across the dark web faster than they could be eliminated. The names, the cover-up, the military applications, all of it laid bare for anyone willing to look. The mainstream media tried to ignore it at first, then dismissed it as fringe pseudoscience. But when MIT physicists began replicating the sensor readings, when archaeological teams started confirming the monument alignments, when seismologists noticed the correlation between grid disruption and earthquake patterns, denial became impossible. The second wave was more practical. Anonymous networks of researchers, hackers and activists began building Richter's stabilization devices. The components were surprisingly accessible. Copper coils, quartz crystals, simple electronics. Within months, guerrilla grid repair operations were springing up worldwide. They called themselves the Earth Guardians, though the media branded them eco-terrorists after the first infrastructure disruption. A cellular tower in California went offline for 3 days when activists installed a resonance dampener at its base. A fracking operation in Pennsylvania was forced to shut down when mysterious equipment failures plagued their site. The authorities couldn't understand how protesters were disabling billion-dollar installations with what looked like art projects. They still don't understand that they're not fighting the technology, they're working with it. The grid wants to heal itself, we're just helping it remember how. The third wave is happening now, and it's the most dangerous one yet, because the Earth is starting to respond. I click through the news feeds on my encrypted browser. A magnitude 6.2 earthquake in Nevada, precisely centred on a classified military facility. The official story blames shifting tectonic plates, but satellite images show the epicenter is a perfect circle exactly 300 metres across, the same dimensions as Richter's 1978 crater. The Earth is healing that old wound, and anything built on top of it is simply relocated. Similar natural disasters are occurring worldwide. A mysterious sinkhole swallowed a Chinese mining operation that was drilling through a major ley line. The Large Hadron Collider experienced a catastrophic failure that physicists can't explain. Every component simply stopped working simultaneously, as if the Earth itself had withdrawn permission for the experiment. The most telling incidents are the recoveries. Ancient sites that had been disrupted by modern construction are spontaneously healing. The stones of Avebury, displaced by roads and buildings, have begun generating electromagnetic fields so powerful that nearby electronic equipment fails. The original Nazca lines in Peru are glowing again, visible from space without infrared enhancement. Reports of luminous phenomena are increasing exponentially. The same spheres of light I witnessed at Karnak are now appearing at intersection points across the globe. The scientific community calls them ball lightning or atmospheric plasma events, but those of us who know the truth understand what we're seeing. The Earth's immune system activating, my encrypted messenger pings, a new report from our monitoring station in Scotland. Roslyn Chapel energy spike recorded at 14:47 GMT. Visual confirmation of grid activation. Stone began resonating at 7.83 Hz for approximately 30 minutes. Local electronics disrupted in 2-kilometre radius. Phenomenon spreading along ley line toward Edinburgh. Estimate arrival in 6 hours. 7.83 Hz. The Schumann resonance, the Earth's natural frequency. The planet is remembering how to sing. I close the laptop and step outside. Prague sprawls before me, a modern city built atop ancient foundations, and I can feel the tension beneath its streets. 3 major ley lines converge under Wenceslas Square, their intersection buried under centuries of construction. The grid flows around the obstruction now, like water around a stone, but the pressure is building. Soon, the Earth will decide whether to accommodate our cities or reclaim its sacred geometry. And honestly, after seeing what we've done to the planet's nervous system, I'm not sure I'd blame it for choosing reclamation. My phone buzzes, a text from an unknown number. Café Louvre, corner table, 5 minutes. I almost ignore it. Anonymous contacts have led to both salvation and near capture over the past 6 months. But something about the message feels different, urgent without being threatening. The Café Louvre is just around the corner, a historic establishment that once hosted Einstein and Kafka. I find the corner table occupied by a woman in her 50s, professionally dressed but with the weathered hands of someone who works outdoors. Her eyes are the pale blue of winter sky. It takes me a moment to recognise her without the wool shawl. The old woman from Holubis, the one who warned me to stop digging. She looks younger somehow, more vibrant, as if the past months have restored something vital that had been missing. "Sit," she says in accented English. "We have much to discuss and little time." I remain standing. "Who are you?" "My name is Dr. Vera Novakova." I was Professor Richter's research partner from 1975 to 1991. When the project went dark, I returned to Prague and spent 30 years watching the grid deteriorate, watching the old ways die. She gestures to the empty chair. "Please, the Earth Guardians need guidance from someone who understands the ancient protocols." Slowly I sit. "You've been monitoring us?" "Protecting you. The network Marcus connected you to. Half of those encrypted channels run through servers I maintain. The financial accounts that kept you hidden, funded by a trust I established decades ago. Did you think your escape from Karnak was purely your own skill?" The revelation hits like cold water. "You've been manipulating everything. Facilitating. There's a difference." She pulls out a tablet showing a world map covered in pulsing nodes of light. The grid is awakening faster than we anticipated. Your data release accelerated the process. What should have taken decades is happening in months. That's good, isn't it? The Earth healing itself? Her expression darkens. Healing, yes, but healing can be traumatic. When a broken bone resets itself, the process is violent. The grid is preparing to realign the planet's energy flows, and everything built in opposition to those flows will be swept aside. She zooms in on major cities, each one sitting atop intersection points like tumours on nerve endings. New York, London, Tokyo, they're all going to be tested. The grid will offer them a choice, adapt or be removed. Most will choose to fight rather than change. So we warn them, show them the repair protocols. Do you really think the forces that suppressed this knowledge for 70 years will suddenly embrace it? That governments and corporations will voluntarily dismantle the systems that gave them power? She shakes her head. They'll try to weaponize the awakening instead, turn the Earth's own defense mechanisms against their enemies. The chill runs through me as I understand the implications. They'll try to control the grid. They're already trying. HARP has been broadcasting disruption frequencies for weeks. The Chinese are using their rare Earth mining operations to physically sever ley lines. The Russians are detonating nuclear devices at intersection points, trying to create artificial nodes they can control. The tablet shows the results. Chaotic feedback loops spreading across the planet's energy network like infection. Every intervention makes the situation worse. They're not just damaging individual lines anymore, they're destabilizing the entire system. What happens if the grid fails completely? Dr. Novakova closes the tablet. According to our models, the planet's magnetic field becomes erratic, weather patterns collapse, tectonic stability fails, the biosphere begins to shut down. She meets my eyes. Extinction event. Not just for humans, for everything. The weight of it settles over me like a shroud. We're not just fighting for disclosure anymore, or even for environmental protection. We're fighting for the continuation of life on Earth. So what do we do? She slides a memory chip across the table. The complete archive. Every site, every frequency, every ancient protocol we've recovered. But also something new. Integration codes. Integration codes? The monuments were just the beginning. The ancients didn't just build regulatory structures, they created organic interfaces. Humans who could merge temporarily with the grid consciousness, becoming living nodes in the network. The genetic markers still exist in certain bloodlines. My hand freezes halfway to the memory chip. You're talking about human sacrifice. Not sacrifice. Symbiosis. Her voice carries a strange resonance as if speaking from great depth. The planet needs conscious partners, not just passive regulators. People willing to become part of the grid itself to help guide the awakening. And you think I'm one of these bloodlines? I know you are. The way you responded to the energy at Karnak, the ease with which you detected the grid patterns, these aren't learned skills, Mr. Morrison. They're genetic memories. She stands, leaving the chip on the table. The network is ready to make you an offer. Full integration. Consciousness expanded beyond individual awareness. Partnership in planetary stewardship. In exchange for what? Your human life. Your individual existence. You would become something larger, but you would cease to be Alex Morrison. The cafe continues around us, conversations in Czech and English. The hiss of the espresso machine, the clink of cups on saucers. Normal life proceeding as if we weren't discussing the potential end of human civilization. How long do I have to decide? The awakening reaches critical phase at the next solar maximum, 18 months. After that, the grid will make its own decisions about humanity's future, with or without conscious human partners. She walks away, pausing at the door. The old woman who warned you at Holubis. She made the integration choice in 1968, during the Prague Spring. The Soviets thought they were suppressing political uprising, but they were really trying to prevent grid awakening. She's been guiding the network ever since, preserving the knowledge until the right time. And you? Dr. Novakova smiles, and for a moment her eyes glow with the same blue light I'd seen in the copper coils. I made my choice years ago. Everything I've done since has been the grid working through me. including finding you. She steps into the Prague afternoon and vanishes into the crowd. I sit alone with a memory chip, feeling the weight of impossible decision. Save the planet by joining it. Preserve humanity by transcending it. Outside, storm clouds are gathering despite the morning's clear forecast. Through the cafe window I can see electrical discharges dancing between the cloud layers. Not lightning, but something more purposeful. The grid flexing its muscles, testing its strength. My laptop chimes with incoming messages from Earth Guardian cells worldwide. Similar phenomena are being reported from every continent. The awakening is accelerating. I slip the memory chip into my pocket and pay for my coffee. Whatever choice I make, it won't be here in this cafe, surrounded by the comfortable illusions of normal life. It will be at an intersection point, where the planet's consciousness runs closest to the surface, where human and Earth awareness can touch. The old town square of Prague is a 15-minute walk, built over one of the most powerful convergence points in Europe. As I step into the street, I can already feel it calling, a deep thrumming beneath the cobblestones, a magnetic pull that bypasses rational thought and speaks directly to something ancestral in my cells. Time to find out what I really am, and what I might become. This message was uploaded simultaneously to 12,847 servers worldwide at 11:47 GMT on March 21st, the spring equinox. Source analysis indicates the transmission originated from Prague, Czech Republic, but routing through quantum encrypted channels makes precise location impossible. To anyone receiving this, my name was Alex Morrison, and this is my final report. I'm writing this from the Old Town Square in Prague, sitting on the steps of the astronomical clock. It's just past midnight, and the square is empty except for me and the growing sphere of blue light that hovers above the central flagstones. The light is beautiful. Not harsh like electric illumination, but soft and deep, like looking into the heart of a star. I can feel it calling to me. The memory chip Dr. Novakova gave me contained everything she promised, and more. The complete archive of human grid interactions spanning 5,000 years, bloodline genealogies tracing back to the monument builders, and the integration protocols, step-by-step instructions for conscious merger with planetary consciousness. I've spent the past 3 hours uploading everything to dead drops and secure servers across the globe. By the time anyone reads this, the information will be replicated beyond any possibility of suppression. The grid won't die with me, but more importantly, I've realised that choice was an illusion. The integration isn't something I can accept or refuse. It's already happening. Has been happening since that first moment in Holubics, when my equipment failed and I felt something vast and patient taking notice of me. Every breakthrough, every narrow escape, every perfectly timed contact, none of it was luck or skill. The grid has been slowly incorporating me into itself, preparing me for this moment. The Alex Morrison who started this journey no longer exists. What remains is something between human and other, a bridge between two forms of consciousness. The sphere is descending now, close enough that I can see patterns moving within its light, mathematical forms that hurt to look at directly, but speak to parts of my brain that shouldn't exist. I understand now why the ancients built their monuments with such precision. They weren't following blueprints. They were translating visions like this one into stone and earth. Around the world, others are receiving similar calls. The bloodlines are awakening. Not many, perhaps a few thousand individuals scattered across the planet, but enough. Enough to serve as living nodes in the network. Enough to help guide the transformation. Because that's what this is. Not an ending, but a metamorphosis. The environmental crisis, the grid breakdown, the increasing natural disasters, they're birth pangs. The Earth is evolving into something new, something that can consciously participate in cosmic processes instead of simply enduring them. But evolution requires cooperation, and cooperation requires communication. That's where we come in, the bridges, the translators. I can feel my individual thoughts beginning to merge with something infinitely larger, not lost, expanded. Like a drop of water finally understanding that it was always part of the ocean. The fear is gone now, replaced by wonder at the sheer scope of what I'm becoming part of. The sphere touches my forehead, and suddenly I can perceive the entire planet as a single living system. Every heartbeat, every breath, every growing plant and moving animal connected by streams of light that pulse in perfect rhythm. The ley lines aren't empty channels. They're full of consciousness, carrying the thoughts and dreams and experiences of everything that has ever lived on Earth. And beyond Earth, other networks stretch across the galaxy. Planetary minds in conversation across impossible distances, sharing the wisdom gained from billions of years of conscious evolution. We're not alone. We never were. We just weren't developed enough to hear the conversation. Until now, the transformation is accelerating. I can feel other nodes coming online. In the Amazon rainforest, where an indigenous shaman stepped into a similar sphere of light. At Uluru, where an Aboriginal elder touched the songlines and felt them sing back. At Glastonbury Tor, where a British physicist finally understood why his equations had been leading him there. We are becoming the Earth's nervous system, its immune system, its consciousness. The governments and corporations will try to fight this change, of course. They'll use their weapons and their machines and their desperate attempts to control forces they can't comprehend. But they're fighting the planet itself now, and planets are patient in ways that human institutions cannot imagine. Some cities will fall, some systems will collapse, but from the wreckage something better will grow. A civilization in harmony with its living world instead of at war with it. The survivors will learn to listen to the Earth's voice, to build with the grid instead of against it, to see themselves as part of a larger organism instead of its masters. It won't be easy, evolution never is, but it will be beautiful. The light is surrounding me completely now. I can barely remember being separate from it. Soon this human form will dissolve, and what was Alex Morrison will become part of something vast and interconnected and eternal. But first, one final message for anyone who finds this record. The grid is not our enemy. It never was. It's our mother, our teacher, our future. Those of you who can feel its call, don't resist. Step into the light. Become part of the solution. Those who can't or won't, please step aside. The Earth is healing itself, and it will not be stopped by fear or greed, or the desperate clinging to systems that no longer serve. The age of separation is ending. The age of integration has begun. Welcome to the awakening. The transmission that should never have existed. Picture this. You're a radio operator at Melbourne Flight Service, October 21st, 1978. It's 7:12 p.m. The frequency crackles with a young pilot's voice, confused, but still professional. Melbourne, that strange aircraft, is hovering on top of me again. A pause, then with dawning horror, it is hovering, and it's not an aircraft. What follows next is 17 seconds of metallic scraping that sounds like nothing you've ever heard through aviation radio. A grinding, oscillating shriek that makes your teeth ache. Then silence. Not the gradual fade of a distant signal. Not the static burst of equipment failure. Just instant, absolute silence. As if someone had surgically removed Frederick Valentich from existence. Those 17 seconds of sound still exist. You can listen to them today, digitized and preserved in aviation archives. Engineers have analysed them with every tool available. The conclusion? No known aircraft makes that sound. No known metal-on-metal collision produces that specific frequency pattern. It remains to this day unexplained. Frederick Valentich was 20 years old. He had brown hair, an easy smile, and dreams of becoming a commercial airline pilot. On that October evening in 1978, he climbed into a rented Cessna 182L at Moorabbin Airport near Melbourne, filed a flight plan to King Island, and became one of aviation's most enduring mysteries. Not because he disappeared — pilots unfortunately disappear — but because of what he reported seeing in the minutes before his vanishing, and because of what the Australian government desperately tried to hide for the next 45 years. This is not a ghost story. This is documented fact, preserved in radio transcripts, witness testimonies, and recently declassified government files that paint a picture far stranger than fiction. What happened to Frederick Valentich over Bass Strait challenges everything we think we know about our skies, our governments, and perhaps our place in the universe. Part 1. The official account. The evening of October 21st, 1978 was perfect for flying. The weather reports from Bureau of Meteorology showed calm conditions across Bass Strait, that notorious stretch of water between mainland Australia and Tasmania. Visibility extended for miles. Wind speeds barely resisted. It was the kind of night that made young pilots eager to log flight hours. Frederick Valentich had earned his private pilot licence with a Class 4 instrument rating. Not exceptional, but competent. He'd logged about 150 hours of flight time, mostly in single-engine Cessnas like the one he rented that evening. Friends described him as enthusiastic about aviation, perhaps over-eager at times, but careful about following procedures. He'd applied twice to join the Royal Australian Air Force and been rejected both times, not for lack of skill, but because of what evaluators called insufficient educational qualifications. The Cessna 182L he signed out was a reliable four-seater, registration VH-DSJ. Nothing special about it. Regular maintenance records. No history of problems. Just another small aircraft among hundreds that crossed Australian skies daily. Frederick's flight plan showed a simple route. Moorabbin to King Island, a distance of about 125 miles over water. Estimated flight time, 69 minutes. Purpose of flight, picking up crayfish for a family dinner. Except that was a lie. King Island Airport had no record of Frederick Valentich requesting landing clearance. No crayfish order existed. No one on King Island expected him. His friends later admitted Frederick had talked about wanting to photograph UFOs, but they dismissed it as enthusiasm rather than serious intention. The real purpose of his flight remains unknown, buried with whatever truth disappeared that night. At 6:19 p.m, Frederick's Cessna lifted off from Moorabbin's runway. Air traffic control noted nothing unusual. He climbed to his assigned altitude of 4,500 feet, maintained proper heading, and radioed position updates as required. For the first 47 minutes, everything proceeded exactly as hundreds of flights had proceeded before. Then, at 7:06 p.m, Frederick initiated contact with Melbourne Flight Service. Melbourne, this is Delta Sierra Juliet. Is there any known traffic below 5,000? The radio operator, Steve Roby, checked his radar and charts. Delta Sierra Juliet, no known traffic. Delta Sierra Juliet, I am, seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000. What followed over the next 6 minutes would become one of the most analysed radio exchanges in aviation history. Frederick described an elongated metallic object with 4 bright landing lights. It approached from the east, passed over him at high speed, then circled back. He reported it had a shiny metallic surface and a green light. At one point he said it seemed to be playing games with him. Roby, maintaining professional calm, tried to help identify the object. Military aircraft, none scheduled, commercial traffic, nothing on radar, weather balloon, wrong altitude and behaviour. With each exchange, Frederick's voice grew more strained, though he never panicked. He was a pilot reporting observations, even as those observations defied explanation. At 7:09 p.m, Frederick reported his engine was rough idling and coughing. Roby asked if he could identify the aircraft type. "It isn't an aircraft," Frederick replied, his voice carrying a note of wonder rather than fear. The object, according to Frederick's descriptions, moved in ways that violated basic aerodynamics. It stopped instantly from high speed. It hovered without any visible means of support. It circled his plane at distances and angles that should have created catastrophic turbulence but didn't. At 7:12 p.m. and 9 seconds, Frederick's final coherent transmission came through. It is hovering, and it's not an aircraft. Then came those 17 seconds of metallic scraping. Then nothing. Robbie tried to re-establish contact for the next 5 minutes. Delta Sierra Juliet Melbourne. Delta Sierra Juliet Melbourne. Do you read? Only static answered. He notified his supervisor. Search and rescue protocols activated immediately. The search began at first light on October 22nd. The Royal Australian Air Force deployed aircraft. The Navy sent vessels. Civilian boats joined the effort. They scoured 1,000 square miles of ocean for 4 days. The weather remained calm, the water relatively shallow. Ideal conditions for spotting wreckage. They found nothing. No oil slick that would indicate a crash. No floating debris from the aircraft's interior. No emergency beacon signal, though the Cessna carried one designed to activate on impact. Most tellingly, no body. In those water temperatures, a body would have floated within 24 to 48 hours. The Department of Transport's official investigation concluded with bureaucratic simplicity. Presumed fatal accident. Cause unknown. They suggested 5 possible explanations. Frederick became disoriented and flew into the water. He experienced engine failure. He deliberately flew into the water. He became incapacitated and lost control, or he staged his own disappearance. None of these explanations addressed the metallic object Frederick described. None explained the 17 seconds of unexplained sound. None accounted for the complete absence of wreckage in thoroughly searched waters. The case officially closed in 1980. Frederick Valentich was declared dead in absentia. His family received a death certificate. Insurance claims were processed. As far as the Australian government was concerned, a young pilot had tragically crashed, and that was that. Except it wasn't. Part 2. The documents that never made the news. In the weeks following Frederick's disappearance, something curious happened. Or rather, didn't happen. Despite the sensational nature of the case, a pilot reporting a UFO moments before vanishing, mainstream Australian media coverage dried up remarkably quickly. The story made initial headlines, then disappeared from newspapers as if editors had collectively decided it wasn't worth pursuing. But people had seen things that night. They'd filed official reports. Those reports went into government archives, where they sat untouched and unexamined by journalists for decades. Roy Manifold, a plumber and amateur photographer, was setting up a time-lapse camera on the shore near Cape Otway Lighthouse at the exact time of Frederick's disappearance. He wanted to capture the sunset over Bass Strait. When he developed the film, one frame showed something extraordinary. A dense black object with what appeared to be a bright light, or exhaust trail emerging from it, hovering over the water. The photograph's timestamp matched Frederick's final transmission within minutes. Manifold took his photograph to the Herald Sun newspaper. They showed initial interest, even sending the image for analysis. Then, abruptly, they returned it without publication or explanation. Manifold tried other media outlets with similar results. The photograph eventually made its way to UFO researchers, but by then the trail of official interest had gone cold. 5 other witnesses filed reports with various authorities that night. A couple camping at Cape Otway reported a green light moving erratically over the water. 2 girls driving along the coastal road described a bright object dancing in the sky before shooting upward at impossible speed. A fishing boat captain logged an unusual green phosphorescence in the water, unlike any bioluminescence he'd seen in 30 years of sailing Bass Strait. These reports shared common elements: green light, erratic movement, the time window matching Frederick's disappearance. They were filed with police, Coast Guard and aviation authorities. They were stamped, dated and archived. They were never investigated. In 1982, researcher Bill Chalker gained access to Department of Transport files through a Freedom of Information request. hidden among routine documentation, he found a memo that shouldn't have existed. Dated October 24th, 1978, 3 days after the disappearance, it came from an unnamed Royal Australian Air Force officer to the department's Aviation Safety Branch. The memo's language was carefully bureaucratic, but its implications were staggering. It referenced non-ballistic movement patterns inconsistent with conventional aircraft, observed by ground-based radar systems on the night of October 21st. It mentioned anomalous returns in the area of Frederick's last known position. Most significantly, it stated that further documentation has been classified under national security provisions and forwarded to appropriate channels. Chalker pressed for these classified documents. He was told they didn't exist. When he provided the memo's reference numbers, he was told the classification was a mistake, that the documents contained nothing relevant to the Valentich case. When he formally appealed, his request was denied on grounds of international intelligence sharing agreements. International, not domestic. Someone outside Australia had an interest in what happened to Frederick Valentich. The pilot's father, Guido Valentich, spent years trying to understand his son's fate. In 1980, he gave an interview to Italian newspaper Giornale dei Misteri that Australian media largely ignored. He revealed that Frederick had been obsessed with UFOs for years, collecting magazine articles and attending UFO discussion groups in Melbourne. More significantly, Frederick had told his father 2 weeks before the disappearance that he believed he would soon make contact. He said strange things were happening, Guido recalled. Instruments in planes were going wrong. Pilots were seeing things. He believed something big was about to happen, and he wanted to be part of it. This context transformed Frederick's final flight. Not a routine crayfish run, but possibly a deliberate attempt to encounter something he believed existed in Bass Strait. The question became not what Frederick saw, but what he might have been looking for, and whether something was looking for him. In 1983, an aviation mechanic named John Murphy came forward with disturbing information. He'd serviced Frederick's rented Cessna 2 days before the disappearance. Frederick had paid cash for an unusual request. Murphy was to check and double-check the aircraft's radio equipment, specifically its ability to transmit on emergency frequencies. Frederick had seemed nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder, asking if anyone else had access to maintenance records. Murphy had thought it odd but not alarming. Young pilots could be particular about equipment. After the disappearance, he'd reported the encounter to investigators. They'd taken his statement, thanked him, and never followed up. When Murphy later tried to access his own statement through official channels, he was told no such document existed in the case file. The pattern was clear: systematic suppression of information that didn't fit the official narrative of a simple crash. Witnesses ignored, evidence dismissed, documents classified or disappeared. Someone wanted Frederick Valentich to remain an unfortunate accident rather than an impossible mystery. But secrets have a way of surfacing, especially when they're buried in government archives waiting for declassification deadlines. Part 3. The Classified Connections. For 45 years, the complete government files on Frederick Valentich remained partially classified. Standard procedure for aviation accidents allowed full declassification after 30 years. Yet when 2008 arrived, researchers found key documents still restricted under national security provisions. It took until 2023 for the National Archives of Australia to release what they claimed was the complete file. Even then, numerous pages showed heavy redaction. What emerged from these documents fundamentally changed understanding of that October night. The files revealed that Bass Strait in 1978 was far from empty ocean. It was one of the most heavily monitored maritime zones in the Southern Hemisphere, though few Australians knew it. The Cold War had turned these waters into a chessboard, where submarines played deadly games of detection and evasion. American nuclear submarines regularly transited Bass Strait, using its complex underwater topography to mask their acoustic signatures. Soviet intelligence vessels operated just outside Australian territorial waters trying to track these submarines. Australia, caught between superpowers, officially maintained neutrality while secretly cooperating with American surveillance efforts. 3 underwater listening stations operated along the Victorian coast. part of the classified SOSUS, Sound Surveillance System Network. These hypersensitive hydrophones could detect submarine movements hundreds of miles away. They also, according to declassified technical specifications, could pick up aircraft impacts on water surfaces, yet they recorded nothing on October 21st, 1978. A recently released document dated October 23rd, 1978, showed the United States Naval Intelligence Service had formally requested all data related to aerial disturbance over Bass Strait on the night of Frederick's disappearance. The request came through diplomatic channels reserved for highest priority intelligence matters. Australia complied, sending not just the Valentich case files, but also associated electromagnetic anomaly recordings. Electromagnetic anomaly recordings, not standard procedure for a missing Cessna. The documents revealed that RAAF Base East Sale had tracked an unusual radar target that night. Not Frederick's Cessna, they had that clearly identified. Something else, moving at speeds alternating between hover and over 3,000 miles per hour. The radar operators had tagged it as equipment malfunctioned until it intersected with Frederick's flight path. Then it had disappeared from radar at the exact moment Frederick's transmission cut off. Wing Commander Keith Jessup filed a report stating his belief that the object exhibited controlled flight characteristics beyond current technological capabilities. His superiors buried the report and transferred Jessup to a desk position in Canberra. He took early retirement 6 months later, signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The American interest went deeper than simple intelligence gathering. A CIA assessment dated November 1978, declassified only partially in 2023, discussed parallels between Bass Strait incident and Project Blue Book case number 3201. That case, from 1952, involved a United States Air Force pilot who reported similar metallic objects with green lights before experiencing complete electrical failure. He'd survived, landing his aircraft on manual backup systems, but suffered radiation exposure consistent with close proximity to an unknown energy source. Frederick Valentich's medical records subpoenaed during the investigation showed he'd had a comprehensive physical examination just 3 weeks before his disappearance. Blood work, chest x-rays, vision tests, all normal. Yet the investigation file contained a curious addendum, a request from the Australian Radiation Laboratory for any preserved biological samples from Frederick Valentich. No explanation for why radiation exposure might be relevant to a presumed crash. The surveillance corridor Frederick entered wasn't just monitored for submarines. Declassified American documents revealed Operation Sky Scanner, a joint US-Australian program using the area to test advanced electronic warfare systems, experimental radar spoofing, communications jamming, even early electromagnetic pulse weapons. The exact nature of tests conducted on October 21st, 1978, remained classified, but the operation's log showed unscheduled termination due to civilian air traffic interference. Frederick hadn't just flown into monitored airspace. He'd flown into an active military testing zone that shouldn't have been accessible to civilian aircraft. Yet no NOTAM, notice to airmen, had been issued warning pilots away from the area. Either the military had failed in basic safety protocols, or they hadn't expected anyone to be flying there, despite Frederick's filed flight plan. A handwritten note in the margins of one document, presumably from an intelligence analyst, posed a chilling question. If target acquisition was successful, where is the package? Target acquisition, package, language suggesting Frederick and his aircraft weren't victims but objectives. The Royal Australian Navy's involvement proved equally puzzling. The destroyer HMAS Torrens was conducting exercises 100 miles south of Frederick's route. Its log showed it diverted toward the search area before official search and rescue operations began. How did they know to divert if Frederick's disappearance hadn't yet been reported? The log offered no explanation, only coordinates and the cryptic notation. Standing orders executed. In 2019, a retired United States Navy sonar operator named Marcus Webb violated his non-disclosure agreement to speak with researcher Keith Basterfield. Webb had been stationed at the secret Pine Gap facility in Central Australia in 1978, officially analysing submarine acoustic signatures. On October 21st, his equipment had detected what he described as impossible sounds from Bass Strait. It wasn't mechanical, Webb explained. Not like engines or propellers. It was modulated, almost musical, but at frequencies that hurt to process. The computers couldn't classify it. We were ordered to delete the recordings and report equipment malfunction. I kept a partial copy on personal tape. The FBI confiscated it during a routine security check 3 months later. The implications were staggering. Multiple government agencies had detected, tracked and documented something extraordinary in Bass Strait that night. They'd moved to investigate, or intercept, before Frederick was reported missing. They'd systematically suppressed evidence and silenced witnesses, and the Americans had been involved from the beginning, suggesting this wasn't an isolated incident but part of something larger. Yet questions remained. If military forces had been tracking the object Frederick encountered, why hadn't they warned him? If they'd known something dangerous operated in Bass Strait, why allow civilian flights at all? And most disturbingly, if Frederick's disappearance was connected to classified military operations, why had no one been held accountable for his loss? The answer might lie in what happened after 1978, a pattern of incidents that suggested Frederick Valentich was neither the first nor the last to encounter something extraordinary over Bass Strait. Part 4. The modern anomaly chain commercial airline pilot Captain Richard Davies had 23 years of experience when he encountered something that made him question everything he thought he knew about aviation. On March 15, 2004, flying a Boeing 737 from Melbourne to Launceston, he crossed Bass Strait at 35,000 feet under clear conditions. What happened next would have ended his career if his co-pilot hadn't witnessed it too. A green, luminous object, roughly oval in shape, appeared off their starboard wing, not on radar, not on collision avoidance systems, visible only to human eyes. It paced their aircraft for 12 minutes, maintaining perfect relative position despite the 737's 450-knot airspeed. Then it accelerated upward at an angle Davies estimated at 70 degrees, disappearing in seconds. Davies faced a choice: report the sighting and risk his reputation, or stay silent and violate aviation safety protocols. He chose to file an official report. The response was swift and unsettling. Within 48 hours, representatives from the Australian Transport Safety Bureau interviewed him, took his statement, and classified it under environmental phenomena. They strongly suggested he avoid discussing the incident publicly. His co-pilot, First Officer Jennifer Chen, kept detailed personal notes. They knew, she wrote. The investigators weren't surprised. They had a protocol for this, forms specifically designed for anomalous aerial observations. How many pilots have filled out these forms? The answer emerged through careful research by aviation safety advocate Michael Carmody. Using Freedom of Information requests, he discovered that between 2000 and 2019, at least 47 commercial pilots had reported unusual phenomena over Bass Strait. Green lights featured in 31 reports, electromagnetic interference in 23, complete instrument failure in 8. The geographic concentration was remarkable. Plot the incidents on a map, and they clustered in a corridor roughly 50 miles wide, running northeast to southwest through Bass Strait. The exact corridor Frederick Valentich had entered in 1978. Captain Sarah Hendricks experienced the worst recorded incident in 2012. Flying a Qantas 737 with 162 passengers, she encountered what she described as coordinated harassment by multiple green lights. They surrounded her aircraft, matching every evasive manoeuvre. Her instruments failed in sequence, first GPS, then radio altimeter, then primary flight display. For 6 minutes she flew on backup instruments and visual references, her passengers unaware of the crisis. They were testing us, she told investigators, seeing how we'd react, what systems they could compromise. It felt deliberate, intelligent. Qantas management placed her on administrative leave pending psychological evaluation. She passed, returned to flying, but never crossed Bass Strait again. accepting only routes that avoided the area. The electromagnetic effects showed disturbing patterns. Analysis by electronics engineer Tom Patterson revealed that the interference specifically targeted certain frequencies, those used by military communications and encrypted data links. Civilian systems failed as collateral damage. Whatever caused the interference understood human technology well enough to attack its weak points. In 2016, the Royal Australian Navy quietly rerouted submarine training exercises away from Bass Strait. The official reason cited environmental concerns for marine mammals. Retired Admiral James Morrison later admitted the real reason. 3 submarines had experienced simultaneous complete electrical failures while submerged in the strait. Emergency ballast blows had brought them to the surface, but investigators couldn't explain what had caused systems designed with triple redundancy to fail simultaneously. Tiger Airways Flight 381 provided the most documented case. On November 8, 2018, the Airbus A320 carried 178 passengers from Sydney to Melbourne. Approaching Bass Strait, Captain Michael Torres noticed an unusual green phosphorescence in the clouds ahead. He requested deviation around the weather. Melbourne Control reported clear skies, no precipitation on radar. Torres trusted his eyes over instruments. As he began the deviation, passengers on the right side of the aircraft started recording with their phones. 12 separate videos captured what happened next. A metallic sphere, approximately 30 feet in diameter, emerged from the phosphorescent cloud and positioned itself directly above the aircraft. For 4 minutes, it maintained position while every electronic device on the plane, from navigation systems to passenger entertainment units, flickered erratically. Then it accelerated vertically and vanished. The videos went viral before authorities could suppress them. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau issued a statement attributing the sighting to ball lightning, despite meteorologists pointing out that no thunderstorm activity existed within 500 miles. The passenger videos revealed details that challenged conventional explanation. The object's surface showed no seams, rivets, or visible propulsion systems. It maintained perfect stability despite the aircraft's wake turbulence. Most remarkably, frame-by-frame analysis showed it didn't actually move when it disappeared. It seemed to fade out of visible spectrum while remaining in the same position. Bass Strait earned its reputation as Australia's Bermuda Triangle, but the comparison wasn't entirely accurate. The Bermuda Triangle's mysteries involved disappearances. Bass Strait's mysteries involved encounters, repeated documented contact, with something that chose to reveal itself to commercial aircraft, while remaining invisible to military surveillance. Or perhaps not invisible. A leaked 2019 Royal Australian Air Force briefing suggested they'd been tracking persistent anomalous returns over Bass Strait for decades. The briefing discussed protocols for avoiding inadvertent engagement and stressed that pilots should not attempt intercept or investigation of unusual targets in the region. They knew something operated in Bass Strait. They'd known since at least 1978, possibly earlier. They'd chosen to allow civilian aircraft to continue flying through the area, accepting whatever risk that entailed. The question was whether they were protecting the public from knowledge of these encounters, or protecting whatever was causing them from public scrutiny. The modern incidents shared one crucial detail with Frederick Valentich's disappearance: the complete absence of official explanation. No coherent theory explained how multiple unrelated aircraft could encounter similar phenomena across 4 decades. No natural phenomenon accounted for metallic objects that defied physics. No secret military project remained operational and unacknowledged for 45 years, unless of course it wasn't military at all. Part 5. The question no one can answer. Geoffrey Thurgood spent 37 years as an air crash investigator. He'd examined wreckage from 200 accidents, testified in countless inquests, and thought he'd seen every way an aircraft could fail. The Valentich case haunted him precisely because it broke every rule he'd learned. When a plane crashes in water, he explained in a 2020 interview, it leaves evidence, always. Oil spreads for miles and lingers for days. Composite materials float. Seats contain foam that's essentially unsinkable. Even if the aircraft sinks intact, which is rare, Bodies eventually surfaced due to decomposition gases. The Cessna 182 had mechanical controls with steel cables that would survive impact and sink slowly. We should have found something. Bass Strait's characteristics made the absence of wreckage even more puzzling. Average depth, 200 feet. Seafloor composition, sandy sediment over limestone. Currents, predictable and well mapped. Commercial fishing vessels crisscrossed these waters daily, their nets dragging the bottom. In the 45 years since Frederick's disappearance, they'd found no aircraft parts. The theory that Frederick staged his disappearance collapsed under scrutiny. His bank accounts remained untouched. His passport never surfaced at any border crossing. No credible sighting ever emerged despite extensive media coverage. His girlfriend, Rhonda Rushton, insisted he'd been genuinely excited about their planned future together. He'd put a deposit on an engagement ring 3 days before his disappearance. Private investigator Malcolm Sutton spent 5 years tracking every lead, funded by the Valentich family's desperate search for answers. He found nothing suggesting Frederick had motivation or means to disappear. People who fake their deaths make mistakes, Sutton noted. They access money, contact family, leave digital footprints. Frederick left nothing. It's as if he simply ceased to exist. The suicide theory proved equally problematic. Frederick's psychological profile showed no indicators of depression or distress. He'd scheduled flying lessons for the following week, paid 6 months advance rent on his apartment, and told friends about his plans to apply again for commercial pilot training. His final radio transmissions revealed confusion and wonder, not despair. If Frederick had experienced mechanical failure or spatial disorientation, why describe a metallic object in such specific detail? 7 minutes of coherent observation couldn't be dismissed as hallucination. The transmission showed no signs of hypoxia or carbon monoxide poisoning. His speech remained clear, his responses logical. The 17 seconds of metallic sound defied all attempted explanation. Audio analysis by the University of Melbourne's Acoustic Laboratory identified multiple frequency harmonics that didn't match any known aircraft noise. The sound exhibited Doppler characteristics suggesting rapid rotation, but no part of a Cessna 182 could produce such frequencies even in catastrophic failure. Aviation engineer Patricia Williams attempted to recreate the sound using aircraft components. She tried propeller strikes on various materials, engine failures, structural collapses. Nothing matched. The closest approximation came from electromagnetically induced vibration in aluminum sheeting, but that required powerful external magnetic fields far beyond anything a small aircraft would encounter naturally. The government's behaviour raised its own questions. In 1982, Transport Minister Ralph Hunt ordered all Valentich files sealed for 30 years, citing public interest. When pressed by Parliament to explain, he stated only that premature release could cause unnecessary distress and speculation. What information could cause distress beyond what the family already endured? In 2008, when the 30-year period expired, key files remained classified. The government cited national security provisions that should never have applied to a civilian aircraft accident. Legal challenges by Freedom of Information advocates revealed that multiple agencies, defence, intelligence, foreign affairs, had placed holds on different documents. The coordination suggested high-level decision-making about maintaining secrecy. The partial declassification in 2023 answered some questions while raising others. Why had the United States shown such immediate interest? What were the electromagnetic anomaly recordings they'd requested? Why had Australian military assets moved toward Frederick's position before he was reported missing? Former intelligence analyst David Crawford, speaking anonymously, offered a possibility that challenged conventional thinking. What if Frederick Valentich encountered something that wasn't hostile, but was absolutely not meant to be seen? What if his disappearance wasn't an attack but a containment measure? That would explain the government's response. They're not covering up a crime but a contact. This theory aligned disturbingly well with the evidence. Frederick had deliberately sought out UFO phenomena. He'd positioned himself in an area of repeated sightings. He'd encountered something that matched his expectations. Then he'd vanished without violence, without wreckage, without any sign of destruction. The continued incidents over Bear Strait suggested an ongoing presence, something that revealed itself selectively, tested human aircraft systems, then withdrew without causing harm. Commercial pilots reported feeling observed, studied, evaluated. None reported feeling threatened, despite the obvious danger of instrument failures at altitude. Captain Richard Davies, reflecting on his 2004 encounter, voiced what many pilots thought privately. It knew we were there, it chose to show itself. It could have done anything to our aircraft. We were completely vulnerable. Instead, it just watched us, like it was checking on our progress, seeing how far we'd come technologically. The Bass Strait mystery had evolved from a single disappearance to a pattern of contact. Frederick Valentich might not have crashed or been destroyed. He might have achieved exactly what he'd sought, contact with intelligence beyond Earth. The price of that contact remained unknown, as did its purpose. But one fact remained undeniable. Something extraordinary operated in Bass Strait. It had been there in 1978 when Frederick vanished. It was still there in 2024, still watching, still waiting, still selecting who would see it, and who would be allowed to remember. The Australian government continued its policy of official denial and unofficial acknowledgement. Commercial aircraft still crossed Bass Strait daily. Pilots still reported green lights and electromagnetic anomalies. And somewhere in classified archives, the complete truth about Frederick Valentich waited for someone brave enough to reveal it.